hate, I'm defying. Hard labor, I came here to modify the system. Take them down if they ain't listening. Straight demolition. From young, everything resistant. Good times I don't really miss them. Gotta pay the cost, no tick. Wick, this hard labor and I'm kicked. Never fit in with the crowd or got into politicking. You can tell I'm built different, trust me. It'll be a sequence of events if you touch me. Even when the women do it love. I've been eye to eye with great people, but you'll be mistaken if you put another one above. Hello everyone, welcome to This Week in Tyranny. It's the most hardcore news show on earth. I'm your host Conrad Rogas. Welcome to episode 81. It is June 22nd, 2024. So here in this episode, I want to talk about transgender health, and I want to talk about layers of morality, and I want to talk about consumer-driven medicine. Let me just put it out there up front. No long intro here, right? I want to get right into the material. I didn't get to prepare this. It is kind of chaotic, and this is the way it's going to be because my situation is chaotic as the creator. I don't have a lot of time to put this together, so I want to dive right into it and kind of lead by example as far as publishing a workout. Getting the word out there, because one of our biggest disadvantages we have is people who are interested in freedom and morality and in principles. The disadvantage we have is that we're also often perfectionists, and perfectionists don't publish work out there. It is really an unfortunate byproduct or a derivative of stagnation. So anyway, without getting stagnated, I want to start with our whistleblower, Mia Hughes. Mia Hughes is a British journalist, author, and now is famous for exposing the WPATH files. Now, what WPATH means, it's the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. So this is an organization that basically is and was the authority for what are the standards for transgender health, really a new area of healthcare, right? So who sets the standards? Well, WPATH used to set the standards, and it did until people like Mia Hughes really specifically blew the whistle and exposed their pseudoscientific practices. And really they have fallen far from that respected authority on the matter, although of course they're being kept afloat by all sorts of activism, all sorts of misinformation. But let me just not throw accusations around. What are their pseudoscientific practices? Well, if you listen to Mia Hughes, as I will link to the show that I listened to that inspired this show, if you listen to her talk and many of the interviews she has done, or just read the WPATH files yourself, you will see that this is really influence and political propaganda disguised as science. And the most striking thing to me, there are many accusations. Let me just go through them. They cite primary sources, citing scientific studies, but then when you look at the scientific studies, they do not fit any of the criteria of being a respected experiment. It's just there as a name. It's a reference. What makes you qualified to do this? Well, you can ask my friend Ricky over there, and you can ask him all about how qualified I am, and he has 5 other friends that can tell you how qualified he is for him to tell you that I'm qualified. So basically this type of referring to nothing, that is another one of the accusations. Really, it's more than accusations, okay? The reality is that when these children walk into these offices, not just children, teenagers, young adults, a patient walks into the doctor's office, and by saying that they are transgender, or saying that they have their gender identity is such and such, that is essentially a diagnosis that they have made themselves about themselves. Now, and when that happens, the medical professional, the doctors and therapists are accepting that diagnosis as being true. They are assuming that they are working off of that diagnosis being true without verifying or making the diagnosis themselves. That does not happen in any other area of medicine, in any other area of healthcare, right? You don't get pills for something just because you say you have it. The doctor will have to do that process himself, right? Apply his training, and because he's the one with the credentials, with the responsibility and the liability, he will have to determine if that diagnosis is accurate and ultimately make that diagnosis himself, right? I can't just go and say I want chemotherapy because I have cancer. They will have to detect that themselves, and they will. Now, so the way they treat transgender individuals has no it has no precedent anywhere in science or healthcare. Where it does have a precedent and where it does have a similarity is business and consumer goods. When you go to the store and you say I want Coca-Cola with chips, you're going to be able to buy Coca-Cola and chips. Nobody is going to look at you and say, well, do you really need that? Right? They're just going to give you what you're looking for. And this is why I call the approach to transgender health care, I call it consumer-driven medicine. And Mia Hughes has talked about this. She is not the only one who has talked about it, but since she is the whistleblower, I think this is the primary voice. This is where people should start with. And of course, this is the case, right? This is the case because this is the political in thing. Politically, it's in to be transgender. So if you ask for that, you will be able to get it. Just like if you would have asked for the vaccine a few years ago or now. This is the thing that is encouraged, right? It's encouraged from all directions inside of the healthcare web and the conglomeration of those institutions. So anyway, their approach is just like the approach of a drug dealer. It's, hey, what you want is what I got. Whatever you need, you can get that. It is just like where you go on Amazon or you go to the store, you can get the goods that you're asking for without concern of what effect that will have on your health. So as opposed to the ancient credo of physicians and health professionals, do no harm. Well, do no harm has been done away with, because now with consumer-driven medicine you have reject no customer, don't turn down a sale, right? These credos and mantras of businesses, of cutthroat, bottom line, cold-blooded capitalist businesses, okay? Or as I call it, drug dealer mentality. You don't turn down a customer. Somebody wants what you're selling. You don't care how it affects them. You don't care if it hurts them. You don't care if they're stealing from their family to feed their addiction. You don't care if you're selling to a child. Now that would be a really a drug dealer with no standards, but essentially that's where that mentality comes from. And the point in me making that comparison between these doctors now, what they're doing with these transgender kids, and what drug dealers are doing, it's really making a reference to, it's making a bigger reference, and it's a metaphor for the world at large, as I have shown in my presentation, Babyface Criminality. This is basically the mentality of the leaders of societal institutions, and I don't mean leaders as in the president, the president of the FDA. I'm talking about leaders as in the beneficiaries of those institutions. I'm talking about the people that stand behind those institutions, often behind and to the side of them. But make no mistake, they are in charge here. They are the beneficiaries of what those institutions do. They are the people that are truly in control. And they have this mentality in all of society's institutions: education, banking, okay, religions, governments, and corporate, all these different societal institutions. It's called This Week in Tyranny, and there's a whole lot of tyranny, and there's plenty of tyranny that all those institutions are engaged in. But when you really go to the core of the problem, they don't function without a customer base, and we are that because a customer. We are the consumer. And this is the reason the world is enslaved, and this is the reason we can't get freedom, is because we're the ones who are asking them for solutions. We are the consumer, right? This is the problem. We are the one walking into that doctor's office, that therapist's office, confused about our identity, just like those children, just like those transgender children. And they have their own interest, and for any issue that we say, they have a solution for every issue. It is us that, as a people, we cannot deal with the crime and settling disputes in our communities. We've never really been able to do that on a large scale. We can do that in small towns, but on a large scale, we have not been able to do that, and it is really this is a problem, whether it's implied or explicit. We cannot handle that ourselves, so then of course the institution, now police, steps in, and whoever's funding the police, which is the government, and of course the government with all their rules, with all their building codes, all of their regulations and their inspections, right? The way they deal with public utilities. If we had addressed these problems ourselves, and we had a system that was as good as that or better, there wouldn't be any societal institutions exerting control over us. So I'm talking about personal responsibility here, right? Ultimately, the responsibility falls on us, because we are not children, and that is the difference here. So, and really, whether it is children or adults, it is still immoral for those institutions to be doing that. And I will talk about proving that. Talk about proving morality. Let me just throw that in there. This is an episode where I'm going to introduce my mathematical proof of morality and the way it is subjective. But anyway, these institutions, they just won't deny any so-called satisfaction. If you need to be satisfied, you're worried about this, you're worried about foreign policy, you're worried about money, well, they're going to offer you their services. The banks will offer you their banking electronic services, but of course it'll come at a fee. Government will offer you their services of protection, but just like the mafia, that protection money is not cheap. And but since we are talking about money, let's talk about money now. This is the problem with these medical professionals, is that they're basically taking money for what they're doing, and it's the only thing they're out for when it comes to these transgender kids. This is what is thought, right? Follow the money, and with anything else, this would be the motivation with doctors, right? Like, what do you always accuse doctors of? Well, they're taking money from the pharmaceutical companies. They're being bribed. They're only looking out for the Lexus in their garage, and for the most part, that would hold true when we talk about corruption. The motive for corruption, other than power, is money, right? To get paid. But with this, there's another layer where it's ideological, where they believe this thing for whatever reason. It's politically motivated. They're believing in this idea that to do away with these gender norms is a good thing. And that could be motivated by money as well, but I really do think that these people truly believe that, some of them. So money is not the only thing that makes an action like that immoral, right? Most people, when I ask, is it immoral to take a bribe as a, say, politician or somebody in some kind of organization? Is it immoral to take money to pass a particular law or make a particular decision? And most people will say yes, but I ask why. If you're performing an action, the action itself has to be moral or immoral, regardless of any emotion associated with it, regardless of any intention associated with it. Because what defines morality is property. There's a property line here. So did you violate somebody's property rights or not? So really, I'm in the minority here, because in the natural law community is very anti-money. And my question is, what is it about taking money for something that makes it magically immoral. It's not the case, but I am under no delusion. I realize that people will do anything for money, and they will do immoral things for money. It's really the trigger of all these immoral things. It's the thing that, it's not the trigger, but the catalyst for all this immoral behavior, mostly in the world. So my argument would be that money is just a language. It is a medium of exchange, right? It's just a buffer zone. But the problem with that is not the money itself, it's the value system of the person accepting it. Right? It's the value system that is off. So it doesn't matter if we had money or no money or anything else. The thing that makes people do immoral things for each other is their value system. Money is just a way to translate value system into actions. So my point is, it's not capitalism here that is making these people act this way. It's the consumption mindset, and this is the big point. It's consumer-driven medicine, and as long as we have the mindset of consumers as patients, we're going to be manipulated, we're going to be hurt, and we're going to be working against ourselves. The consumer will always be dependent on the producer, and that's not an artificial concept, right? That's nature. So, nothing to do. Money has nothing to do with moral or immoral because it's neutral. Now, what isn't neutral is that these children and young adults who are being subject to this transgender care, they are, as Mia Hughes has demonstrated, they are participating in something that is actually substandard. It's under the standards of experimental medicine. It's worse than experimental, because when you're taking a trial, when you're a member of a trial of an experimental treatment or medicine, you actually have all kinds of forms, consent. You're informed. You have a right to this and that. But for these children, it's worse than an experiment, right? It's something that's really going to hurt them. It's going to permanently change them. It's going to damage their fertility. It's going to damage an area that is not fully developed yet. And I would say that is a theft. That is immoral just in itself. When you corrupt a child's future sexuality or sexual development, their fertility, you are taking away something that they do not have the capacity developed yet to protect. It is a violation of rights, in my view. But anyway, basically, not only is it experimental medicine, and worse, it's just a scam. WPATH, straight up in their standards of care, as it has come out in the WPATH files, it's basically just a lie for insurance purposes. So money is here again. They frame these things in a way where they can get around calling it experimental. Little word games, okay? But I won't dwell on that because I just loosely threw that in here, okay? Bottom line is, this is something that wouldn't work on a small scale because it's so obviously criminal and brazen crime. But it works because it's done on a societal level, because the media is pro-trans, because politicians are pro-trans, and I don't mean pro-trans individuals, I mean pro-trans ideology, which I've talked about really in recent previous episodes. This idea that the normal and traditional has no value at all, and that gender is meaningless, and that you can just play mix and match with your body parts. Really very, very unfortunate that they are reaching traumatized children with such a predatory, destructive mindset. These people are getting scammed. And because it's such a big lie on a societal level, that's why it works. Hitler is quoted as saying, you got to make the lie big, right? Paraphrasing that one. You have to make the lie big, and that's the only way it'll work, and that's government. These are the institutions that we have. They exist because we have a consumer mindset. We have a patient mindset, and we're going into the doctor's office, and we're almost like those transgender children who are making that diagnosis. We're coming into the game with a preset diagnosis, which is that I am not self-sufficient. Can you help me? And they say, yes, we can help you. So, okay, I've got a lot of notes here that it'll get sloppy if I go through it this way. So, let me explain it in my own words off the top of my head. I mentioned that I was going to explain morality in a mathematical, objective way. And really, I was searching for a way to really put into context what these doctors are doing with these transgender kids, with the way, you know, they're treating them, the things that WPATH is doing by publishing these standards of care, which is full of lies, which is full of pseudoscience, right? Unethical practices. Well, they're unethical, but are they immoral? So, you know, if you're listening to my video, you know about natural law, the basics of what can basically and simply be objectively stated to be immoral. And just to define or redefine what I mean by moral, because moral has a connotation which is kind of religious or subjective, or having to do with like the subconscious and like guilt and emotions. All I'm talking about is it right or is it wrong? Is it a violation of rights, or is it not a violation of rights? Is it good or evil? Okay, and there is an objective answer to that, and the objective violations of rights, right, the objectively immoral things to do are to take somebody's life away, to damage somebody's property, right, which is their body first and foremost, to steal their property, right, their body or the other things they own. Of course, to, you know, rape would be a theft of free association. It would be a theft of dignity. It's really the worst crime. Imprisonment, right, these things. And then also, of course, I'm talking about Mark Passio's work here, right? So you would have the seventh of those 7 deadly sins, so-called. You would have deception, which is theft of truth. And here's where you get into a bit of a gray area, because you think about all the little white lies you could say. You could think about the really damaging, malicious lies you can say. And this is where this is the area we're getting into now with WPATH and these toxic ideologies, and whether that is immoral or not. You know, is it immoral to tell your girlfriend or your significant other that you love what she's talking about and that you love the way she looks when you really don't? Is that immoral? Is that actionably immoral? Should it be in the same category as those violations of rights? Well, this is, you know, this is really the only gray area that you could have under natural law. But of course, there can be no gray area on something that is objectively true with natural law is, right? Morality is a mathematically true, observable, provable concept. So, and this has to follow the axiom of non-contradiction, which is A equals A, right? Something that is immoral will always be immoral no matter what other circumstances, and something that is moral will always be moral no matter what circumstances, no matter the time and place. So I was looking for a way to model this, and okay, so I'll have to go into my mathematical reference point. So the way to model this, it's actually been done 100 years before me, and this is something called Gödel's incompleteness theorem. First name, I believe, Kurt Gödel. He published his first incompleteness theorem in 1931, which states that, I'll link the video. that'll give it a visual representation, and that'll give me that'll make it possible for me to not confuse you even more, right? So here we go.
Consider the following sentence. This statement is false. Is that true? If so, that would make this statement false. But if it's false, then the statement is true. By referring to itself directly, this statement creates an unresolvable paradox. So if it's not true and it's not false, what is it? This question might seem like a silly thought experiment, but in the early 20th century, it led Austrian logician Kurt Gödel to a discovery that would change mathematics forever. Gödel's discovery had to do with the limitations of mathematical proofs. A proof is a logical argument that demonstrates why a statement about numbers is true. The building blocks of these arguments are called axioms, undeniable statements about the numbers involved. Every system built on mathematics, from the most complex proof to basic arithmetic, is constructed from axioms. And if a statement about numbers is true, mathematicians should be able to confirm it with an axiomatic proof. Since ancient Greece, mathematicians used this system to prove or disprove mathematical claims with total certainty. But when Gödel entered the field, some newly uncovered logical paradoxes were threatening that certainty. Prominent mathematicians were eager to prove that mathematics had no contradictions. Gödel himself wasn't so sure, and he was even less confident that mathematics was the right tool to investigate this problem. While it's relatively easy to create a self-referential paradox with words, numbers don't typically talk about themselves. A mathematical statement is simply true or false, but Gödel had an idea. First, he translated mathematical statements and equations into code numbers so that a complex mathematical idea could be expressed in a single number. This meant that mathematical statements written with those numbers were also expressing something about the encoded statements of mathematics. In this way, the coding allowed mathematics to talk about itself. Through this method, he was able to write "this statement cannot be proved" as an equation, creating the first self-referential mathematical statement. However, unlike the ambiguous sentence that inspired him, mathematical statements must be true or false. So, which is it? If it's false, that means the statement does have a proof. But if a mathematical statement has a proof, then it must be true. This contradiction means that Gödel's statement can't be false, and therefore, it must be true that this statement cannot be proved. Yet this result is even more surprising because it means we now have a true equation of mathematics that asserts it cannot be proved. This revelation is at the heart of Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which introduces an entirely new class of mathematical statement. In Gödel's paradigm, statements still are either true or false. But true statements can either be provable or unprovable within a given set of axioms. Furthermore, Gödel argues these unprovably true statements exist in every axiomatic system. This makes it impossible to create a perfectly complete system using mathematics, because there will always be true statements we cannot prove. Even if you account for these unprovable statements by adding them as new axioms to an enlarged mathematical system, that very process introduces new, unprovably true statements. No matter how many axioms you add, there will always be unprovably true statements in your system.
So this guy proves that there's something that is, there are statements, axioms that are true, but they cannot be proven. And this is groundbreaking for mathematics, and it's groundbreaking for morality, because this is the category that you are in, where as these doctors, as these influencers, as these people who are, publishing lies out there and manipulating people, while you directly are not putting the knife to anybody and causing damage to their body, right? You're not directly imprisoning them. You are acting immorally. You are essentially doing something that will damage the property of another person. But since it is not provable, then it is not actionable, which means that, then referring to the two fundamental axioms of natural law, which is the non-aggression principle and the self-defense principle. Non-aggression is that you have the rights to your property, and you do not have the rights to transgress on anybody else's property. Then the self-defense principle is that if somebody does infringe on your property, then you are within your rights to infringe on theirs, because they have forfeited their rights when they came to violate your rights. They are no longer under the protection. So you can only apply the self-defense principle if you can prove that was an immoral action that they took. That's how it works. Otherwise, you don't have that solid, airtight claim under natural law. You can still perform those actions, but then the person that you are doing those actions to, they have a claim that their rights are being violated. So this is this area, and it's not a gray area. And of course, Gödel's incompleteness theorem has not made mathematics non-objective. It hasn't made it any less true. That statement is not any less true. It just cannot be proven. And this is why you need people to call these people out, like Mia Hughes, like me, because that is the only thing that is going to bring this to light. And we need to expose this so people know what's going on, because people need to take themselves out of that consumption mindset, of the patient mindset with a diagnosis. The parents of these children, right? The people in the community who have these children. You in your community, you know some of these people who are confused. They don't have to be transgender. They could be doing other things that are self-destructive, right? You don't. And the people who are injecting those ideologies into their life, maybe they cannot be put to the guillotine for doing that, but they certainly are engaging in immoral behavior nonetheless. And all of those little so-called gray area things, they are immoral. Now, the third category of morality, which has been debated not as hotly, is it immoral to hurt yourself? Is it immoral to damage yourself? And long story short, the answer is no. You need to have the ability to make this mistake and do this tragic thing, which is to damage yourself, to hurt yourself, to live your life in a way that is going to destroy you, even if that affects the world at large in a destructive way. Because after all, we live in a fractal universe, right? So if I live in a way that is destroying me, well, all my loved ones are going to feel that too. So I actually will be hurting them indirectly. But this is in that third category now. Those are false statements. That will never be immoral, because if it is immoral to destroy yourself, then that means there is no free will. And if there's no free will, then there's no morality in the first place. That is really a short version of something that would be a full-length presentation. It really needs to be a book, because the way I see it, that is the next step in the science of natural law. All credit goes to Mark Passio, who in the modern day has really, if this is philosophy, he's Aristotle, right? So the fundamental axioms, although they've always existed throughout history, right? Nobody came up with natural law, but when you really talk about a concrete system that is bringing these, like logic, bringing these axioms forward and talking about principles, that is right. That is who I'm referring to, and then the way this is represented by Gödel's incompleteness theorem. For me, this is the next piece in the puzzle, and it's not over, right? The fact that we cannot solve this problem by resorting to force, resorting to violence, it doesn't mean that these people are right for what they're doing. It just means that at the current stage, we are limited, just like arithmetic is limited in its capability to explain these fundamental axioms of the universe to us. But we need to keep pushing forward, and this is what this episode is all about. It's pushing forward despite me not really having a cohesive plan to put this forward, right? I don't even have time to put this episode out the way I want to. But we don't control our circumstances, right? We get thrown into these circumstances, we work with what we've got. And I'm going to leave it there. And maybe I'll, next week, maybe I'll bounce off of this, because I haven't even been able to listen to Mia Hughes' interview in entirety, right? But it's remarkable. I'm so grateful for the whistleblowers, like Mia Hughes, like Mark Passio, right? All of the people that have had one foot in these institutions and or have seen into the other side, into the darkness, they've come back, and we still don't believe them, we still don't listen to them. And it may just be because we cannot get ourselves free of that consumer mindset. We will always be like chickens in a cage, and it seems like people will never really break free from that nature. Well, until then, I keep trying week after week to make it happen. So, thank you very much, and I'll see you next week on This Week in Tyranny.
In this tournament, the chosen few shall be triumphant, and the devil will be decapitated. So you can keep your ducats and your dresses. I won't be emasculated in this world of scientific madness. Scientific madness. My status is the baddest.